He warned her, "Accept my ex or the wedding is off." She whispered okay, and in that single word, she seized everything he thought was untouchable. How did one word destroy an empire? Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this unforgettable story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll bring you another incredible tale you absolutely can't miss. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and share to help our community grow. The champagne flute felt like crystal ice against Jade Monroe's palm as she stood on the balcony of the Ashford estate, watching Philadelphia's skyline glitter beneath a bruised October sky. Behind her, the engagement party roared with laughter, old money mixing with new, the kind of crowd that measured worth in stock portfolios and legacy admissions. 24 hours ago, she'd belonged here. She'd earned her place at this table through sleepless nights at Wharton, through building her digital marketing firm from a laptop in her cramped studio apartment to a company worth 8 figures. Now, she felt like a stranger in a life she'd bled to create. "You're hiding again." The voice came smooth as aged bourbon, and Jade didn't need to turn to recognize Trevor Ashford's approach. 6'2", Norwegian ancestry written in sharp cheekbones and winter blue eyes, heir to Ashford Industries, a tech conglomerate worth $300 million. Her fiancé. The man who, 2 hours ago, had handed her an ultimatum disguised as a compromise. "Just getting air," Jade said, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. She kept her eyes on the skyline, on the towers she'd once dreamed of conquering. At 31, she'd built something real. Monroe Digital had contracts with Fortune 500 companies, a team of 40, revenue that made investors salivate. She'd done it without handouts, without trust funds, carrying her grandmother's warnings like armor. Never let them make you small, baby girl. Never shrink yourself to fit their comfort. Trevor moved beside her, his cologne expensive and familiar. His hand found the small of her back, a gesture that once felt protective. Now it felt like ownership. "Cassidy's inside. She's excited to reconnect with you." Cassidy. The name landed like a stone in still water. Cassidy Whitmore. Trevor's ex-girlfriend of 6 years. The socialite daughter of a Manhattan real estate dynasty, blonde and polished as a pearl, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. They'd broken up 18 months ago, supposedly amicably, supposedly because they'd grown in different directions. Trevor had said it was over. He'd said Jade was his future. Then, 3 weeks ago, Cassidy had reappeared at a charity gala, her hand light on Trevor's arm, her laugh tinkling like breaking glass. "We're still friends," Trevor had explained later. "That's healthy, isn't it? Mature." Jade had nodded, swallowed her unease, told herself that secure love could hold space for complicated pasts. But this afternoon, in Trevor's study, he'd closed the door and delivered his terms with the casualness of discussing dinner reservations. "I need Cassidy in my life, Jade. She understands my world, the business dinners, the foundation work, the social obligations. I'm asking you to accept that she'll be part of our circle. A close part. If you can't handle that." He'd paused, letting the silence sharpen into threat. "Then maybe we're not ready for marriage. Accept my ex or the wedding is off." Jade had stared at him, searching for the joke, the punchline. But Trevor's face had been granite, serious, immovable, entitled. In that moment, she'd seen him clearly, a man who'd never been told no, who viewed compromise as something others performed for him. "What does accept mean, exactly?" she'd asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "It means trust. Flexibility. Understanding that my relationship with Cassidy doesn't threaten what we have." His smile had been patronizing. "Come on, babe. You're not the jealous type. That's beneath you." The gaslighting was almost elegant in its simplicity. "You're overreacting. You're insecure. You're not sophisticated enough to understand how evolved people love." Now, on the balcony, Trevor's thumb traced circles on her spine. "So? Can we move past this? I don't want tension at our wedding." Our wedding. The ceremony planned for 6 weeks from now at his family's estate in the Hamptons. 500 guests. Vera Wang dress. A reception that would be featured in Town and Country. She'd redesigned her entire business schedule around it, turned down a speaking engagement in Dubai, postponed a major client pitch. Jade turned to face him, studying the man she'd thought she'd spend her life with. In the golden light spilling from the ballroom, he looked like a Renaissance painting, beautiful, distant, untouchable. She'd loved him for his ambition, his vision, the way he pursued her with single-minded focus after they'd met at a tech conference. He'd made her feel chosen. Now she saw the truth. She'd been acquired. Another asset in the Ashford portfolio. Okay, Jade whispered. Trevor's shoulders relaxed, relief washing over his features. Really? Thank you, babe. I knew you'd understand. He leaned in for a kiss, but Jade turned her head, letting his lips brush her cheek. I need to make a call, she said. Client emergency. She walked back through the party, past the curious glances and champagne-bright smiles, past Cassidy holding court by the fireplace in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Jade didn't stop. She kept moving through the marble foyer, past the crystal chandeliers and ancestral portraits, out the front door into the crisp autumn night. In her car, she sat in darkness, her hand steady on the steering wheel. Her phone glowed with messages, her assistant asking about Monday's presentation, her mother sending heart emojis, her best friend Simone checking if she'd survived the party. Jade ignored them all. Instead, she opened her encrypted files, pulling up the folder she'd been building for 3 months, ever since her instincts had started screaming that something was wrong. Due diligence. Research. The habit of a woman who'd learned never to sign a contract without reading the fine print. What she'd found about Trevor Ashford, about Ashford Industries, about the empire built on her future father-in-law's ruthless consolidation of smaller tech firms. Jade smiled in the darkness. A cold, precise smile that would have made her grandmother proud. Okay, she said again, tasting the word's power. Trevor thought he'd won. He had no idea the war had just begun. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog, the kind that made Philadelphia look like a noir film, all shadows and muted edges. Jade sat in her office on the 40th floor of Liberty Tower, the city spread beneath her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she hadn't noticed. Her mind was a machine, processing variables, calculating trajectories, mapping the architecture of her revenge. Monroe Digital occupied the entire floor, open-concept workspace designed to foster creativity, floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with light, her private office tucked in the corner like a war room. Usually, the space hummed with energy, her team collaborating on campaigns, the coffee bar bustling, the ping-pong table seeing action during lunch breaks. This early on a Sunday, it was silent. Just her and the ghosts of choices she was about to make. Her computer screen glowed with tabs she'd been studying since 4 a.m. Ashford Industries financial reports. SEC filings. Board member profiles. Merger documents from their acquisition of Technova Solutions 3 years ago. The paperwork for their upcoming IPO, scheduled for 8 weeks from now, 2 weeks after what would have been her wedding. And there, buried in the fine print of a subsidiary contract, the thing that made her pulse quicken with dark satisfaction, a clause, overlooked by Trevor's lawyers, that gave minority stakeholders veto power over C-suite appointments if they could prove fiduciary negligence. Trevor's father, Richard Ashford, had written it decades ago as protection against hostile takeovers. He'd never imagined it could be weaponized from within. Jade's phone buzzed. Trevor's name lit up the screen with a text. Brunch at the club? Want to show you off to the Wunderhosts. They're flying in from Martha's Vineyard. She didn't respond. Instead, she dialed a number she'd saved 3 months ago, when her instincts had first whispered that she needed insurance. Garrett Bishop. The voice that answered was gravel and smoke, belonging to a man who'd made his reputation dismantling corporate empires for sport. Mr. Bishop, this is Jade Monroe. We met at the CFO Summit in June. A pause. Then, the woman who asked me about asset protection strategies while everyone else was networking over canapes. I remember. What can I do for you, Ms. Monroe? I need a lawyer who specializes in corporate warfare. Someone who doesn't mind getting blood on their suit. She heard the smile in his voice. My favorite kind of client. When can you come in? I'm already on my way. Garrett Bishop's office occupied a converted brownstone in Rittenhouse Square, the kind of place that whispered old money and older secrets. He was 50-something, black, with silver threading through close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. His handshake was firm, his smile sharp as a blade. Let me guess, he said as Jade settled into the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. Rich fiancé, prenup that's more favorable to him than you, and you've just realized you're about to sign away your leverage. No prenup, Jade said. He insisted we didn't need one. Said it showed a lack of faith. Bishop's eyebrows rose. Interesting. So he's either an idealist or an idiot. Neither. He's confident I'll never leave. Men like Trevor don't plan for rejection, they've never experienced it. Men like Trevor, Bishop repeated, leaning back. Tell me about Trevor Ashford. Jade opened her laptop, turning it so he could see the screen. Trevor Ashford, heir apparent to Ashford Industries. Harvard MBA, sits on 4 boards, groomed since birth to take over when his father retires next year. The company's planning an IPO that'll value them at $2 billion. Trevor will become CEO, and his personal net worth will jump to $300 million overnight. And you? I own Monroe Digital. Worth $23 million. I built it from nothing in 7 years. Pride threaded through her voice, undeniable. Trevor proposed 6 months ago. Swept me off my feet with the kind of courtship that felt like a fairy tale. I thought. She stopped, swallowed. I thought he saw me as an equal. But yesterday, he gave me an ultimatum. Accept his ex-girlfriend as a permanent fixture in our lives, and I mean permanent, intimate, boundaryless, or the wedding's off. Bishop's expression didn't change, but something glinted in his eyes. Recognition. He'd seen this play before. Let me guess. The ex is from his social circle. Old money. The kind of woman his parents always imagined he'd marry. Cassidy Whitmore. Manhattan real estate dynasty. They dated for 6 years before me. And now he wants both of you. Bishop's voice was flat. A wife with the business savvy and a mistress with the pedigree. Tale as old as time, Ms. Monroe. These men always think they can have everything. The word mistress landed like a slap, but Jade didn't flinch. She'd already named the truth in her own mind. I said okay and walked away. He thinks I capitulated. He thinks I'll show up at the wedding, smile for the cameras, play the grateful bride who's lucky to marry into the Ashford legacy. But you're not going to do that. No. Jade's smile was ice. I'm going to take everything. Bishop studied her for a long moment, the kind of assessment that felt like an X-ray. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, uncapped a fountain pen. Talk to me about Ashford Industries. What do you know that Trevor doesn't know you know? This was the moment. The point of no return. Once she spoke, she'd be declaring war on a man who commanded armies of lawyers, who could bury her in litigation, who had the kind of connections that could blacklist her from every boardroom in America. Jade thought of Trevor's hand on her back, possessive and presumptuous. Thought of Cassidy's smug smile, the way she'd looked at Jade like a placeholder. Thought of all the time she'd made herself smaller, quieter, more palatable to fit into Trevor's world. Never let them make you small, baby girl. 3 years ago, Jade began. Ashford Industries acquired a company called Technova Solutions. $50 million deal, positioned as a strategic merger. Trevor led the acquisition team. It was his first major project, his chance to prove himself to the board. I remember reading about it. Tech press called it a brilliant move. It was. Except for one problem. The due diligence was rushed. Trevor wanted to close before fiscal year end to boost quarterly numbers. In the rush, they missed something. Jade pulled up a document, turned the screen. Technova's founder, Martin Chen, owned a patent for data encryption software that's now core to Ashford's entire infrastructure. The acquisition contract states that Ashford purchased all assets and intellectual property. But Chen never actually transferred the patent. It's still in his name. Bishop went very still. That's not possible. Ashford's lawyers would have caught that. They did. But the correction paperwork was never filed. I found the email chain. Trevor's assistant was supposed to handle it, forgot, and then Trevor buried it rather than admit the oversight to his father. He's been operating for 3 years on infrastructure his company doesn't legally own. Jesus. Bishop leaned forward. Does Chen know? Chen died 18 months ago. Cancer. His estate went to his daughter, Lauren Chen. She's 28, runs a non-profit in Seattle, has no idea she's sitting on leverage that could force a $100 million settlement. And you know this because I'm very good at research. And because 3 months ago, when Trevor started acting strange, I started digging. Jade's voice was steady, clinical. I also know that Ashford's IPO is contingent on proving they own their core technology. If this patent issue surfaces, the IPO collapses. The company's valuation craters. Trevor's reputation is destroyed. Bishop set down his pen. Ms. Monroe, what exactly are you proposing? I want to contact Lauren Chen. Offer to broker a deal where she sells the patent, not to Ashford, but to Monroe Digital. Then I'll license it back to Ashford at terms favorable to me. Terms that include seats on the board, voting rights, and equity that makes me a major stakeholder. You want to hold his company hostage. I want to own a piece of his empire. Legally. Irrevocably. Jade's eyes were dark fire. Trevor thought he could make me choose between my dignity and his money. I'm choosing both. Bishop was quiet for a moment, then he started writing, his pen scratching across paper with surgical precision. This is aggressive. Risky. If Trevor discovers what you're doing before the deal closes, he'll come at you with everything. I know. You'll need to move fast. Contact Chen's daughter, negotiate the patent purchase, structure the licensing agreement, and present it as a fait accompli before he can counter. How long? For weeks. Maybe 5 if we're careful. Jade calculated, 5 weeks would put them 1 week before the wedding. Perfect timing. Do it. Bishop extended his hand. Ms. Monroe, you just hired the most expensive lawyer in Philadelphia. My retainer is $50,000. Jade shook his hand, her grip firm. Bill me. And Mr. Bishop? This stays between us. No one in my office. No one in my circle. This is a ghost operation until the moment we strike. Understood. Bishop's smile was wolfish. Welcome to the war, Ms. Monroe. Let's go build you an empire. Week 1 felt like living in 2 realities simultaneously. In one reality, Jade was the glowing bride-to-be, attending cake tastings with Trevor's mother, smiling through seating chart discussions, nodding politely while Cassidy offered unsolicited opinions about floral arrangements. Peonies are so overdone, don't you think? Cassidy had said at the florist, her hand resting casually on Trevor's forearm. Trevor's always loved orchids. They're more sophisticated. Trevor had looked to Jade expectantly, waiting for her to defer. She'd smiled, the smile she'd perfected in boardrooms when men interrupted her presentations, and told the florist, peonies. Blush and ivory. Just as we discussed. A small victory, but it had made Cassidy's jaw tighten. In the other reality, the real one, Jade was building a war machine. Garrett Bishop worked with the efficiency of a man who'd toppled kingdoms before breakfast. Within 72 hours, he'd located Lauren Chen in Seattle, initiated contact through a carefully worded letter expressing interest in her father's patent portfolio, and scheduled a video call for the following Monday. She's curious, Bishop had reported. Didn't know the patent existed. Her father never mentioned it, probably didn't think it was significant. She's agreed to hear us out. Jade had prepared for that call like it was an Olympic event. She'd researched Lauren's non-profit, a tech education program for underprivileged youth in the Pacific Northwest. Read every interview Lauren had given, watched her TEDx talk about democratizing access to coding education, studied her social media for insights into her values, her priorities, what would make her say yes. The call had taken place in Jade's apartment at 6 a.m., early enough that Trevor wouldn't question why she wasn't answering his morning texts. Lauren Chen had appeared on screen in a hoodie and glasses, her home office cluttered with books and half-drunk coffee mugs, looking nothing like the heiress to a fortune she didn't know she possessed. Ms. Chen, Jade had begun, her voice warm but professional, thank you for taking the time. I'll be direct. Your father's patent for adaptive encryption software is currently being used as the foundation for Ashford Industries' entire data infrastructure. They've been using it for 3 years without proper legal ownership. Lauren's eyes had widened. How is that possible? Oversight during the acquisition process. It happens more often than you'd think. What matters now is that you have leverage. That patent is worth anywhere from $50 to $100 million, depending on how it's negotiated. 100. Lauren had paled. I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? This was the crucial moment. The place where Jade's pitch could either soar or crash. Because Ashford Industries will eventually discover the error, and when they do, they'll pressure you into selling for pennies on the dollar. They'll use legal intimidation, delay tactics, everything in their arsenal. I'm offering you an alternative. Sell the patent to my company, Monroe Digital, for $60 million. Cash. Clean transaction. Then I'll handle the negotiation with Ashford on licensing terms. Why would you do that? Lauren's skepticism was visible. What's in it for you? Jade had leaned forward, letting Lauren see the truth in her eyes. Leverage. Control. A seat at a table I've been excluded from. And the satisfaction of beating men at their own game. She'd paused. I've researched your non-profit, Ms. Chen. Imagine what you could do with $60 million in funding. How many kids you could reach. How many lives you could change. Lauren had been quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through shock, calculation, and something that looked like recognition. Finally, you're screwing over Ashford Industries. I'm correcting an error and claiming compensation. There's a difference. Does this have anything to do with Trevor Ashford? I saw the engagement announcement. You're marrying him. Jade's smile had been cold as winter. Not anymore. Lauren had studied her through the screen, and Jade had watched the moment the other woman made her decision. Send me the contract. I want my lawyer to review it. If everything checks out. She'd smiled, sharp and knowing. Let's burn it down. Week 2 brought complications. Trevor wanted to combine their bachelor and bachelorette parties, a modern celebration, he'd called it, at his family's estate in the Hamptons. More fun if we're together, he'd said. Plus, Cassidy's helping organize it. She has great taste. Of course she was. Jade had agreed with the bland pleasantness that was becoming her default mask. Inside, her mind was racing. The patent purchase was in final negotiations, Lauren's lawyers were reviewing the contract, and Bishop was confident they'd have signatures by the end of the week. But that meant Jade needed to keep Trevor's suspicion at bay for 10 more days. 10 days of playing the compliant fiancé while she systematically dismantled his future. The party was a nightmare wrapped in luxury. 50 guests, open bar, a DJ who'd played Coachella, catered food that cost more per plate than most people's car payments. Trevor held court like a king, his arm around Jade's waist while Cassidy orbited them like a satellite, her presence constant and cloying. Having fun, babe. Trevor had whispered in Jade's ear during dinner, his breath wine-sweet. It's perfect, Jade had lied. She'd excused herself to the bathroom, needing space from the performance. In the marble and gold powder room, she checked her encrypted messages. Bishop had sent one line, Chen signed. Patent transfers Monday. You own the keys to the kingdom. Jade had stared at her reflection, the woman in the designer dress with the perfect makeup, the engagement ring catching light like a weapon. She looked like someone who belonged in this world. But beneath the polish was the girl who'd grown up in West Philadelphia, whose mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, who'd learned that survival meant being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone expected. When she'd returned to the party, Cassidy had been sitting in her seat, laughing at something Trevor said, her hand on his thigh. Trevor had looked up, caught Jade's expression, and for a moment, something like guilt had flickered across his face. Then Cassidy had shifted, making room, and Trevor had pulled Jade down next to him, kissing her temple like she was a child to be pacified. Cassidy was just telling me about the honeymoon villa her parents offering us in Tuscany, Trevor had said. What do you think? Better than the Maldives. Jade had looked between them, Trevor's expectant smile, Cassidy's triumphant smirk, and understood the game completely. They wanted her complicit in her own humiliation. Wanted her to smile and accept and pretend this was normal, that love could be split like assets in a portfolio. The Maldives is fine, Jade had said quietly. We already have reservations. Trevor's jaw had tightened. Babe, don't be rigid. Cassidy's just trying to help. Cassidy's just trying to help. The same phrase he'd been using for weeks, as if Jade's discomfort was the problem, not his ex-girlfriend's intrusion into every corner of their life. Jade had stood, smoothing her dress. I need air. She'd walked to the beach, leaving the party noise behind. The Atlantic had stretched before her, dark and infinite under sliver moon. Her phone had buzzed, Simone, her best friend since college, texting from New York. How's the party? Surviving the Cassidy show? Jade had typed back, barely. But it won't be much longer. What does that mean? I'll explain soon. Trust me. Another message had arrived, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Monroe, this is Lauren Chen. The patent is yours Monday morning. Go make them pay. Jade had smiled into the darkness, the sound of waves a symphony of promises. Behind her, Trevor's laughter carried on the wind, oblivious and entitled. He thought he had everything figured out. Thought Jade would bend and break and ultimately accept whatever scraps of affection he deigned to offer. He had no idea that while he'd been playing house with his ex-girlfriend, Jade had been buying the deed to his empire. Week 3 was when Trevor started to sense something was wrong. "You've been distant," he'd said over dinner at his penthouse, his tone hovering between concern and accusation. "Is this still about Cassidy? I thought we moved past that." "We did," Jade had said, cutting into her steak with surgical precision. "I've just been busy with work. Big client pitch next week." "Right. Work." Trevor had set down his fork. "You know, after we're married, you won't need to work so hard. You could scale back, enjoy life more. We'll have plenty of money." There it was. The quiet erosion disguised as care. "You won't need to work." Translation: "Your career is a hobby you can discard once you have access to my fortune." Jade had looked at him, really looked, and wondered how she'd ever mistaken his confidence for strength. Trevor Ashford was a man who'd never built anything from scratch, who'd inherited his position like a birthright, who couldn't conceive of a world where he wasn't the center of gravity. "I like working," Jade had said. "Monroe Digital is mine. I'm not walking away from it." "I'm not asking you to walk away. Just reprioritize. Marriage is about compromise, babe." Compromise. The word he used when he meant capitulation. "You're right," Jade had said, and watched relief flood his features. "Marriage is about compromise." That night, after Trevor had fallen asleep, Jade had gone to his study. She'd needed to see it, the space where he delivered his ultimatum, where he'd been so certain of his power. The room was unchanged, leather and mahogany, diplomas on the walls, a photograph of his family's estate in a silver frame. On his desk, she'd noticed a folder labeled IPO, confidential. Her fingers had itched to open it, but she'd resisted. She didn't need to see the numbers. She already knew what was coming. In 4 days, Monroe Digital would officially own Martin Chen's encryption patent. In 5 days, Garrett Bishop would deliver a formal notice to Ashford Industries, cease use of the technology or negotiate licensing terms. In 6 days, Trevor would realize that his fiancée, the woman he'd tried to diminish and control, held the power to destroy his company's public offering. And in 7 days, Jade would present her terms. She'd left the study and returned to bed, sliding under the covers next to a man who'd never truly seen her. Trevor had reached for her in his sleep, pulling her close, murmuring something that might have been "love you." Jade had stared at the ceiling, counting down the hours until her victory, and felt nothing at all. What would you do if someone you loved asked you to compromise your dignity for their comfort? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before what would have been her wedding day. Jade was in her office, reviewing Q4 projections with her CFO, when her phone lit up with Trevor's name. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times, a small cruelty, making him wait, before excusing herself and answering. "We need to talk. Now." His voice was acid and ice, all pretense of affection stripped away. "My office. 1 hour." He hung up before she could respond. Jade set down her phone, her hand steady despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. This was it. Ashford's legal team had received Bishop's notice yesterday afternoon. Cease and desist use of Chen encryption technology, or negotiate licensing terms with Monroe Digital, the patent's new owner. She'd been waiting for Trevor's reaction, wondering if he'd come to her with rage or desperation. Apparently, he'd chosen rage. She took her time getting ready, reapplied lipstick, straightened her blazer, chose her highest heels. Armor for battle. When she arrived at Ashford Industries headquarters in Center City, the receptionist's smile was strained. Word had clearly spread that something was wrong. Trevor's corner office occupied the 45th floor, all glass and steel with views that made mortals feel like gods. He was standing at the window when she entered, his shoulders rigid, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "Close the door," he said without turning. Jade complied, then crossed to his desk, perching on the edge with calculated casualness. "You wanted to see me." Trevor spun around, and the fury in his face was almost beautiful in its purity. "What the hell did you do?" "I'm going to need you to be more specific." "The patent." He stalked toward her, and Jade noticed his hands were shaking. Martin Chen's encryption patent. The one that's been integrated into our entire infrastructure for 3 years. You bought it. You bought it out from under us. I did. Jade's voice was silk. Well, technically Monroe Digital purchased it from Lauren Chen, Martin's daughter. For $60 million. Quite reasonable, considering its value. Reasonable. Trevor's laugh was jagged. You sabotaged us. The IPO is in 2 weeks. We can't go public without proving we own our core technology. You knew that. He stopped, realization dawning. You've been planning this. Since when? Since the engagement party. Since you gave me an ultimatum about your ex-girlfriend. Jade stood, meeting his eyes. Since you made it clear that I was expected to accept scraps while you kept all the power. You thought I'd say, okay, and fall in line. I did say okay. You just misunderstood what it meant. Trevor's face cycled through emotions, disbelief, betrayal, something that might have been respect if it wasn't drowning in rage. This is insane. You're destroying my company over jealousy. This isn't about jealousy, Trevor. This is about respect. About power. About men like you thinking you can have everything while women like me should be grateful for crumbs. Jade's voice was steady, surgical. You wanted me to accept Cassidy as a permanent fixture in our marriage. To smile and play nice while you split your attention between us. To pretend that was love and not humiliation. I never, Trevor started, but Jade cut him off. Yes, you did. You gave me a choice, accept being diminished, or lose you. You thought losing you was the worst thing that could happen to me. She smiled, cold and sharp. You were wrong. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look younger, more vulnerable. Okay, I hear you. I screwed up. The thing with Cassidy, I can end it. I will end it. We can fix this, babe. We can. I don't want to fix it. The words landed like stones in still water. Trevor froze. What? I don't want to marry you, Trevor. I haven't wanted to for weeks. Maybe longer. I just didn't realize it until you showed me exactly who you are. So this, Trevor gestured wildly, all of this, the patent, the sabotage, this is revenge? You're destroying my company because I hurt your feelings. Jade laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. I'm not destroying your company. I'm restructuring our relationship. Business relationship. She pulled a folder from her bag, set it on his desk. Here are my terms. Trevor stared at the folder like it was a snake. Terms. For licensing the Chen patent back to Ashford Industries. I'm not unreasonable, Trevor. I don't want to see your IPO fail. I just want compensation for the value I'm providing. Jade opened the folder, revealing the contract Bishop had drafted. Monroe Digital will license the encryption technology to Ashford for the next 10 years. In exchange, I want 20% equity in Ashford Industries, 2 seats on the board of directors, and full voting rights on all major business decisions. The color drained from Trevor's face. 20%. You want to own 1/5 of my company. It's not your company. It's your father's company. And soon, part of it will be mine. Jade's smile was radiant. Think of it as a wedding gift. You wanted to merge our lives. Now we're merging our assets. Just not in the way you imagined. Trevor's hands clenched into fists. My father will never agree to this. Your father is retiring next year. You'll be CEO. The decision is yours. Jade's voice softened, became almost gentle. Trevor, you have 2 options. Accept my terms, let the IPO proceed, and everyone wins. You become CEO of a $2 billion company, I become a major stakeholder, and we both walk away richer. Or refuse, force me to pull the patent, and watch your company's valuation crater. The IPO fails, the board loses confidence, and your father hands the CEO position to someone else. Probably your cousin Mitchell. I hear he's been waiting for you to fail. It was a guess, but the way Trevor flinched told her she'd hit the mark. Office politics were predictable. There was always a rival waiting in the wings, always someone ready to capitalize on weakness. You're blackmailing me, Trevor said, his voice hollow. I'm negotiating. There's a difference. Jade picked up her bag, preparing to leave. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires, and I take my patent to your competitors. I hear TechCorp has been eyeing Ashford's market share. I'm sure they'd love to license technology that would give them an edge. She walked to the door, then paused, looking back at the man she'd once imagined spending her life with. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the realization that he'd underestimated her. That the woman he tried to control had been a queen playing peasant, waiting for the right moment to reveal her crown. For what it's worth, Jade said quietly, I did love you. Or I loved who I thought you were. The man who pursued me like I was worth something. Who made me believe we were partners. She shook her head. But that man was a fantasy. The real you, the man who'd make me share you with your ex-girlfriend, who'd ask me to shrink so you could feel big, that man, I don't love at all. Jade, wait, Trevor's voice cracked, and for a moment, she saw genuine panic in his eyes. Not panic about losing her. Panic about losing everything else. 48 hours. Trevor. Choose wisely. She left him standing in his glass tower, surrounded by the illusion of power, finally understanding what it felt like to be outmaneuvered. The next 48 hours passed like a held breath. Jade went about her life with the surreal calm of someone who'd already won. She attended meetings, approved campaigns, laughed with her team over lunch. But underneath, she was waiting. Waiting for Trevor's decision. Waiting to see if he'd choose pride or survival. Garrett Bishop called her every 6 hours with updates. Radio silence from Ashford's legal team, he reported on day 1. They're scrambling. Richard Ashford flew back from London early. Family emergency meeting scheduled for tonight. On day 2, they've brought in 3 different law firms to review your contract. Looking for loopholes. They won't find any, I wrote it airtight, but they're trying. Simone had flown in from New York the moment Jade had explained everything. They sat in Jade's apartment that second night, drinking wine while Simone oscillated between shock and fierce pride. I can't believe you did this, Simone said for the 4th time. I mean, I can believe it. You're the smartest person I know. But Jesus, Jade. You really went nuclear. He gave me no choice. Jade swirled her wine, watching the liquid catch the light. You should have seen his face when he gave me that ultimatum. Simone. He was so confident I'd accept. So sure that keeping him was worth any humiliation. Men like that always are. Simone leaned back, studying her friend. So what happens now? If he signs your contract? Then I become a major player in a $2 billion company. Monroe Digital merges with Ashford's resources, and I build something neither of us could have built alone. And if he doesn't sign? Jade's smile was sharp. Then I license the patent to TechCorp, they use it to crush Ashford Industries, and Trevor spends the rest of his career explaining to his father how he lost an empire because he couldn't keep his ex-girlfriend at arm's length. Remind me never to cross you, Simone said, but she was grinning. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on the second night. Garrett Bishop's name on her screen. Jade answered, her heart a steady drum. Tell me. He signed. All terms accepted. Richard Ashford countersigned as current CEO. The licensing agreement is official, and your equity stake transfers Monday morning. Bishop's voice carried satisfaction. Congratulations, Ms. Monroe. You just became one of the most powerful women in Philadelphia tech. Jade closed her eyes, let the victory wash over her. Thank you, Garrett. Send me the final documents. Already in your inbox. Oh, and Jade? Trevor wanted me to pass along a message. What message? He said, she wins. Bishop paused. For what it's worth, I don't think he meant just the business deal. After they hung up, Jade sat in silence, processing the enormity of what she'd done. She'd walked into Trevor's world as his fiancé, expected to be grateful and compliant and small. She was walking out as his equal, no, his superior, with her dignity intact and a fortune to match his. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Cassidy. I don't know what you did, but Trevor's been locked in his study all day, and his mother is furious. Whatever happens next, I hope you're happy with yourself. Jade stared at the message, then typed back, I am. Thanks for asking. She blocked the number and poured herself another glass of wine. Outside her window, Philadelphia glittered like scattered diamonds, full of possibility, full of promise. Somewhere in that city, Trevor Ashford was reckoning with the cost of his arrogance. Learning that some women couldn't be controlled, couldn't be diminished, couldn't be asked to accept less than they deserved. Jade raised her glass to her reflection in the darkened window. "Never let them make you small, baby girl," she whispered, echoing her grandmother's voice. "Never shrink yourself to fit their comfort." She'd followed that advice to the letter, and it had made her a queen. 6 months later, Jade stood in the Ashford Industries boardroom on the 52nd floor, looking out at a view that now belonged partially to her. The Philadelphia skyline stretched in every direction, a kingdom of steel and glass and ambition. Behind her, the board of directors was assembling for the quarterly meeting, 12 powerful people, and she was one of them now. Ms. Monroe. Richard Ashford's voice carried the gravel of age and grudging respect. Trevor's father was 72, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, a man who'd built an empire through ruthlessness disguised as vision. When Jade had first joined the board, he'd looked at her like an invader. Now, after watching her navigate 3 months of corporate warfare with precision that rivaled his own, he looked at her like a worthy opponent. "I read your proposal for the Technova integration. Bold. Expensive. But sound. Thank you, Mr. Ashford." Jade took her seat at the table, third from the head, a position she'd earned through strategy and leverage. "I think we can increase efficiency by 40% if we execute correctly. We'll discuss it after the IPO report." Richard glanced toward the door. "Is Trevor joining us?" As if summoned, Trevor entered, his suit immaculate, his face carefully neutral. 6 months had changed him. The easy arrogance had been replaced by something harder, more cautious. He'd learned to calculate before he spoke, to measure his words like currency. The IPO had been successful. Ashford Industries was now valued at $2.3 billion, but everyone in this room knew who'd made that possible. Trevor took his seat across from Jade. Their eyes met briefly, and something flickered in his expression. Regret, resentment, resignation. Maybe all three. Then he looked away, pulling out his tablet, all business. The meeting proceeded with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Financial reports, strategic initiatives, market analysis. Jade contributed where appropriate, her insights sharp and data-driven. She'd spent 6 months proving she wasn't just a stakeholder who'd strong-armed her way in. She was an asset, someone who understood both technology and business in ways that made the company stronger. When the meeting adjourned, most of the board filtered out, heading to lunch or their next obligation. Jade gathered her materials slowly, deliberately, knowing what was coming. "Jade." Trevor's voice, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Can we talk?" 5 minutes. She considered refusing, but curiosity won. 5 minutes. They walked to the executive lounge, a smaller conference room with leather chairs and a coffee bar that served espresso that cost more per cup than most people's hourly wage. Trevor closed the door, then stood there, hands in his pockets, looking younger than his 34 years. "I don't know what to say to you anymore," he admitted. "Every conversation feels like a negotiation." "That's because it is," Jade said, but her tone wasn't cruel. Just factual. "We're business partners now, Trevor. That's what you made us." "That's not what I wanted." "No. You wanted a wife who'd accept being second place to your ex-girlfriend. You wanted control without accountability. You wanted everything." Jade set down her bag, met his eyes. "How's Cassidy, by the way?" Trevor's jaw tightened. "We're not together. Haven't been since everything happened." She wasn't interested once it became clear I wasn't going to be the uncomplicated golden boy she'd imagined. "Imagine that," Jade said dryly. "Turns out she wanted you for your status, not your character. Who could have predicted?" Then she turned off her phone, walked back into the reception, and spent the rest of the evening connecting with founders and dreamers and women who were building their own empires, one courageous choice at a time. 1 year after the ultimatum, Jade Monroe sat in her corner office at Monroe Digital, now housed in a building she owned outright, and reviewed the latest quarterly reports. Her company had tripled in value. Her stake in Ashford Industries had made her one of the wealthiest self-made women under 40 in the country. She sat on 4 boards, mentored a dozen female entrepreneurs, and had just launched a venture capital fund specifically for women of color in tech. Her grandmother's photograph sat on her desk, the frame silver and simple. Jade touched it gently, remembering the woman who'd raised her to be strong, to be smart, to never let anyone make her small. I did it, Grandma, she whispered. I didn't shrink. I grew so big they couldn't ignore me. Outside her window, Philadelphia sparkled in the afternoon sun, full of dreamers and builders and women who were just beginning to understand their own power. Somewhere in that city, Trevor Ashford was probably in a meeting, making decisions for a company he no longer fully controlled. Cassidy Whitmore was likely planning another charity gala, searching for her next conquest. And Lauren Chen was opening her 5th tech education center, changing lives with the fortune Jade had helped her claim. Everyone had gotten exactly what they deserved. And Jade? Jade had gotten everything she'd earned: respect, power, wealth, and the unshakable knowledge that she'd never again accept less than she was worth. Her phone rang. Simone's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," Jade answered, smiling. "What's up?" "Dinner tonight? There's someone I want you to meet. Brilliant, gorgeous, runs a sustainable fashion startup, and she's been asking about you since she saw your Forbes interview." Jade laughed, the sound genuine and light. "Is this you trying to set me up?" "Maybe. You've conquered the business world. Time to conquer the romance world. Unless you're planning to marry your quarterly reports." "Dinner sounds good," Jade said, surprising herself. "Send me the details." After they hung up, Jade stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Below, the city pulsed with life and possibility and second chances. She'd spent a year building her empire, proving her worth, becoming untouchable. Maybe it was time to let someone touch her again. Someone who saw her as she was, powerful and vulnerable, victorious and still healing. A woman who turned okay into a declaration of war and emerged on the other side stronger than she'd ever imagined. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and full of promise. Jade Monroe was ready to claim it all. "Here's my question for you. When have you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your power? What did you choose? And would you make the same decision again? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear how you've stood up for yourself." 2 years later. The wedding invitation was cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering, elegant in its simplicity. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Jade Monroe and Dr. Aisha Okafor." Simone had been right. The woman she'd introduced Jade to that night, Dr. Aisha Okafor, founder of a sustainable fashion empire and professor of environmental design, had been exactly what Jade needed. Someone brilliant and driven, someone who understood power but didn't weaponize it, someone who saw Jade's strength not as a threat but as a gift. They'd taken it slow. Careful. Both of them carrying scars from past relationships, both of them learning to trust again. But over 2 years, something real had grown between them. Partnership built on respect, love built on seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway. The wedding was small, intimate. 50 people in a garden in Fairmount Park, autumn leaves falling like blessings. Jade wore ivory, Aisha wore champagne, and when they exchanged vows, there were no ultimatums, no conditions, no suggestions that either of them needed to be anything other than exactly who they were. "I choose you," Jade said, her voice steady and sure. "Not because I need you to complete me, but because you make me want to be more myself. You make me braver. You make me kinder. You make me believe that love doesn't have to mean making yourself small." Aisha's eyes glistened. "I choose you because you're the strongest person I know, and you've never once made me feel weak for being soft. You've shown me that power and vulnerability can coexist. That winning doesn't mean someone else has to lose. That love, real love, is about building each other up, not tearing each other down." In the audience, Simone sobbed openly. Lauren Chen, who'd flown in from Seattle, smiled with quiet satisfaction. Garrett Bishop, looking uncomfortable in formal wear, actually wiped his eyes. And in the back row, uninvited but not unwelcome, Trevor Ashford sat alone, watching the woman he'd once tried to control marry someone who'd never dream of diminishing her light. When Jade glanced his way after the ceremony, he raised his glass in a small salute, acknowledgement, maybe even blessing. She nodded back. Then she turned to her wife, to her future, to the life she'd built from ashes and ultimatums and one whispered word that had changed everything. "Ready to go build our empire." Aisha whispered, linking their fingers together. Jade squeezed her hand, smiling with a kind of joy that came from being fully, completely seen and loved anyway. Always. They walked into their future together, two queens who'd never have to shrink, who'd never have to choose between love and power, who'd learned that the best partnerships were the ones where everyone won. And somewhere in Philadelphia, In boardrooms and startup offices and coding boot camps funded by women who'd refused to accept less than they deserved, a new generation was rising. They'd learned from Jade Monroe's story. Learned that okay could be a weapon. That walking away could be victory. That sometimes the best revenge wasn't just succeeding, it was building something so magnificent that everyone who'd underestimated you had no choice but to witness your glory. The empire Jade had claimed wasn't just made of money or power or boardroom victories. It was made of choice. Of dignity. Of refusing to compromise the essence of who you were for anyone, no matter how much they offered in return. And that empire would stand forever. The story shows that sometimes the most powerful response to someone trying to make you small is to grow so magnificently large they can't look away. Thanks for experiencing this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it.